Hello, our HazChat friends and family. Welcome to another exciting episode of HazChat. We are in 2026. This is the second episode of 2026. And I'm here with my good friend Derek and my accomplice in air monitoring. I told you I'm gonna have something new
Accomplice.
every show. There's gonna be something new.
I feel like now I'm going to be somehow held legally liable for your actions. I don't necessarily like being an accomplice, but yeah, like Bob said, I'm Derek Shawman. Today we're going to talk about it's an important topic. It's a little bit tough to talk about, but it is something that responders do respond to on a not a regular basis, but enough that we need to be aware of it, and that's chemical suicides. So, kind of bridging that gap between medical, law enforcement, and hazmat all together. So, definitely a tough subject, but the information we're going to talk about, we're going to get into the functions of it.
Yeah, and before we hit our sponsors, I was just recently with our good friend Chief Lee Turner in Jefferson City, and he made me aware of a new trend that is happening. So we'll talk about that as well. So, but without further ado, here's a little something from our sponsors. Hey, HashChat listeners, looking to boost your skills? Check out respondertraining.com. They've got top-notch responder training and essential tools like their 1-inch propane and CNG flare-off kits, water injection tools, and much more. Train smart, stay safe, and excel in the field. That's respondertraining.com. Enhance your hazmat training with Signal, the most realistic gas detection training on the market. For under $100, you can simulate any detection combination from handheld meters to fixed location monitors, and even confined space scenarios with their universal pump attachment. Signal delivers unlimited range and detector combinations trusted by top teams around the world. Visit signalapp.com or download the app now. Signal, unlimited range, unlimited possibilities. In Our Gear products, built by first responders for first responders. In Our Gear delivers innovative, field-tested tools for every level of hazmat response. The ZMAT card empowers ops-level responders to set the initial tone with quick, easy-to-use hazard identification. The ArcLaw line boosts efficiency for technicians in the hot zone, and the WIMS board enhances command competence from behind the steering wheel. Trust in Our Gear, where reliability meets response. InOurGear.net. And we're back just like that. So, like Derek talked about, this topic's tough, especially during the holidays, after the holidays. It's really tough anytime, quite honestly.
Hmm.
But these events have become more frequent, present their own set of hazards. They happen in, I mean, all kinds of places. We found them in hotel rooms. I personally found them in a hotel room. I've personally found them in a car, in a bathtub of an apartment. I mean, they can really happen anywhere.
Yeah, and we're going to hit on four major types, which a lot of hazmat and fire responders should be familiar with: hydrogen sulfide, helium, potassium cyanide, and carbon monoxide. Those are some of the more frequent types that we see out there. If you listen to our episode that dropped at the beginning of January, Bob also is going to share a little info on incidents involving the actual use of propane for this. And also, Bob will tie in the information that was shared with us by Chief Turner into a newly emerging technique that they're starting to see up around his way. So, for each one, we'll kind of walk you through the chemical and physical properties as best we can, and the general hazards that are associated there. And like I said, Bob's got real world examples of each one of these that he's going to share with us, and so let's get
So
into it.
one of the first ones, because this one that kind of just popped up recently close by me involved the propane. Um, to be quite honest, I've never heard of suicide by propane. We're still gathering information on it, but I believe the call came in as a well-being check. How many times have we gone on those, right? And
Hmm.
from what I understand, either the neighbor or somebody smelled the mercaptan, And that's when it kind of got escalated to that point. We're still gathering more information on it, but the reason why I'm bringing that up first is because that's something you don't hear about. I mean, we hear about, and we'll talk about helium and some other things in a few minutes, but to be quite honest, I'd never heard of a propane. So you think about the hazards with that, with propane sinking, just waiting for ignition source, how that could have not only, unfortunately, this person passed away, but it could have exploded. There could have been other people, yardmen. It could have been some catastrophic uh, incidents involving other people.
Yeah, and it definitely throws in an element that a lot of times we don't see with these. In a lot of these incidents, there are warning notes to first responders because the person's intent is to harm themselves, not
Right.
others. And with the propane incident that Bob was talking about, we don't know the person's overall intentions or anything, and it may have just been something that it was easily ready available to them, and they didn't consider the risk that was posed beyond that, or maybe it was part of a bigger decision that they wanted to create harm to others in addition to themselves. So definitely a little bit of a bucking of the trend where a lot of times responders are warned. This adds in a little bit more of possibility of increased threat to us when we get to these calls.
Yeah, and the big thing with the propane is, it could be called in from a neighbor that says, "Hey, I smell gas,"
Hmm.
and then you get there and it's a suicide. I mean, that would have been like, "Ooh, whoa, hold on." So we'll get more information on that one. I just wanted to throw that one in real quick up top because that just recently happened. So
Yeah.
the first one we're going to talk about is hydrogen sulfide, and with the hydrogen sulfide gas, there's a lot of things that we don't consider. Um, in these different types of situations. It's very toxic. It's created by mixing simple products, and we're not going to get into how you make it and all that stuff. That just would not be a good idea. Um,
Hmm.
but I've had a couple of these, and one of the things that we talk about the toxicity of this is that the we had some good friends of ours, Todd Burton out in San Diego, California, part of the HazMat team there. They did some testing in a remote area. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a 32-ounce concoction of the materials made
Hmm.
in a bucket, and they had air monitoring sensors. And from their readings at the door of the passenger door of the vehicle was 330 parts per million, just from a 32-ounce concoction. The interior was 11,000 parts per million.
Hmm. Well, and that's a big red flag to me because at 100 parts per million, we're hitting IDLH, and that's because once we hit 200 parts per million, we get olfactory fatigue and nerve paralysis, which means we lose the ability to smell it, and that's where Bob always makes a point of saying, when you're going on these well-being calls, checking on someone, especially like a vehicle in a parking lot, the vehicle is isolated from other cars, things like that. Be smart about it. Think about how you're approaching it. Approach upwind. Get a good look at what's going on. Don your SCBA before you go and interact with the vehicle. Look in through the windows. Is there anything there that could present harm to us? A firearm next to the person, something that looks like maybe it could be set to where if we open a door, it's going to cause a problem. This is a law enforcement and hazmat fire department event, and we need to take it seriously and approach it the right way.
Yeah, and something also to consider if you get that call for a person pass out behind the wheel of a vehicle, um, that's something that you might want to bring up a set of chalks to chalk the tire as well. Bring it up with you. And I
Hmm.
honestly, is it overkill what I'm getting ready to say? Probably, but air's free. Have somebody get dressed out and on air because as you pull up, it's and we talk about this all the time. We don't go to a fire and go, okay, let me see if the building's really burning inside. Okay, let me go back and put my gear on. So why not have at least one person dressed out, SCBA, go up there? Because you know what? You can go in up there and maybe make a quick grab. And because you're not wasting time putting your crap on, those last few seconds, is what was needed to save this person's life. So, you know, be prepared.
Yeah. And like Bob said, the test that Todd Burton that they did out there, it showed 320 parts per million through the weather sealed door.
Yeah.
Once you open that door, once you hit about 700 parts per million, a single breath is enough to put you down and put you into cardiac arrest. So this isn't something to play around with. It's something you have to be very mindful of. And add in the additional factor that hydrogen sulfide, when it comes into contact with any kind of moisture, now you're also creating sulfuric acid. So you don't want to be breathing any of this in, whether it's the 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 toxicity of the hydrogen sulfide, the corrosiveness of the sulfuric acid that's presented by just bad stuff. And how do we protect ourselves from this, Bob?
Wear your PPE, including your SCBA, because there was a first responder in the Florida area at a rest stop, went up to the car, and she got close enough that she went unconscious at the door of the car as she was reaching to open it. So that's in the outside environment. So you can only imagine what was inside. So there's just no excuse not to be prepared.
Hmm.
So at any rate, let's hit another one.
So So that was hydrogen sulfide. Uh, Helium or other inert gases. Helium is a super easy one to get, so it became very commonplace because you could go to any party supply store and pick up a cylinder of helium, bring that in. It's just simply working off the fact that it is displacing oxygen, usually done in an enclosed space, or you would see people making a hood that they would run the lines into. Um, the upside to it is from a responder perspective, it's not as much of a hazard to us other than the oxygen deficient environment. Um, but again, going into it unprepared, depending on how much was released or any of those things, we don't want to have those effects because it is colorless, it is odorless, there's no taste to it. Um, and this is one that it's lighter than air, so our ability to detect it's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be hanging out where we are. Obviously, put helium in a balloon, balloons fly up to the sky.
Right.
So your gas is going to do the same thing.
And an example again, I don't know why these happen to me, but a well-being check, and we had just done a chemical suicide class for our department, and the particular engine company went on a call, and it was one of those pay by the week, pay by the month hotel motel kind of places. And when they went up to the hotel room, they were able to open a door a little bit, had that hotel throw on it, that little catch, but they could see just inside the door. This is the actual scene where it was a DNR, just, and for those of you who don't know what DNR, do not resuscitate, taped to the side of the TV so that when the first responders open the door, that's the first thing they see is this. And then when they walked in, they saw the victim sitting on the couch with two bottles of helium um, up into a plastic bag. And there's some other details that I'm just not going to go into, but um, this person definitely was making sure that they passed away from the helium exposure.
Yeah. Well, and you know, once you identify that and you've done your initial assessment of the the unfortunate victim and you've determined that they're not viable, your priority needs to immediately be shifting to adjacent occupancies.
Yeah.
Anyone who entered that hotel staff, if they were their family that may have been in there, we need to evaluate all those people because unfortunately we've lost one. We can prevent the loss of others by being proactive and making sure what's there. There is no clue to that product being there. And that's why, whether it's a hotel room, a vehicle, especially vehicles, you approach a vehicle with someone unresponsive, get all the doors open, not just the door where you're accessing the patient. Because the faster you get all the doors open, anything that could be there that's a hazard is ventilating out.
Right, exactly. And let's not forget this is a crime scene now as well. So
Hmm.
we've got to make sure that it's only a minimum amount of people entering. If it's your protocol to confirm whether or not the person is deceased or not. Whatever your thing is, just remember this still is a crime scene, and we need to protect it as such.
Yeah. Um, The next one we'll talk about, we'll jump on potassium cyanide. So this is for those of you who remember your chemistry, it's just a salt that when mix it with acids or we ingest it, it will produce hydrogen cyanide, which is a toxin at the cellular level. So the hydrogen cyanide, depending on how your multi-gas meters are set up, that hydrogen cyanide sensor may be your indicator that it is there. Um, other indicator would be people saying, there's like a bitter almond smell. That would be something that would be a bystander relaying information. It should not be our responders relaying that information. We should not be smelling it. But that bitter almond smell, when you hear people talk about that being associated with the potassium cyanide, only about 40% of the population can actually identify that odor. So don't rely on that too much. You want to just kind of look around. Do I see any kind of like a white crystalline powder? That's going to be the giveaway that I've got some sort of a salt, and it could be a cyanide salt.
Yeah, and again, another one we had where somebody had left a note on the front door of a house, and it said, "Postman, please call 911/HazMat. Cyanide, sorry." And that was taped to the door. So when the
Hmm.
engine company gets there, they see this, and of course, they call us the hazmat people, and it's like, okay, what kind of cyanide? So we didn't really know. And one of the things that I always preach, and I hope you guys do this as well, don't just rush in. Do a 360 like you would for a fire, because you can
Hmm.
walk around and look in windows and see, first off, is your entry point booby trapped? Number one, kind of thinking back to
Yeah.
meth labs, and maybe that'll be another discussion for us. But you're walking around and you're seeing what's going on inside. And we were actually able to see the victim laying on the couch, and we dressed our people out appropriately, went in, and what he had done is he had purchased potassium cyanide on the internet, mixed in a bottle of water. He was real careful how he did it. He even wore gloves while he was mixing it. Left a suicide note, his ID next to that, laid down on the couch, drank his concoction, and that was it. And this was his second attempt. His first attempt, when he tried it, his family members found out about it, and they put him into uh, a mental institution or whatever for a period of time. And when he got out,
Hmm.
he didn't tell anybody. He went and did what he did, and there you go. So the moral of the story is, first, recon, like we always talk about, um, and secondly, just be careful. We don't need to just rush right into this. And then the third thing is, once again, it is a crime scene.
Yeah, and cyanide calls, because of the ingestion factor of it, they pose an additional risk, and they're absolutely unforgiving because while you're treating the patient, assessing them, any of those things, they're off gassing. So something as simple as performing CPR, every exhalation from that person during CPR is going to potentially be putting hydrogen cyanide into the air. Vomit, any kind of emesis, anything that's come out of this person is carrying the potential of off gassing hydrogen cyanide, which is going to be a risk to our initial responders. It's going to be a risk to law enforcement when they're doing their investigation. Uh, the medical examiner who has to come out and do confirmation, or if we did transport the person, look at your transport personnel and the ED that's going to be receiving them. This is where Bob and I've talked about it before. We have a system for a hazmat alert. That's one of those you need to make sure it's known. Hey, this is a cyanide exposure, and this person is presenting a hazard in and of themselves because of the off gassing.
Yeah, and Derek mentioned hazmat alert, and we weren't going to really get into it, but just to really quickly let you guys know, because this came from an organophosphate poisoning twice at a certain hospital, and that department in our area said, "Hey, we have a STEMI alert, a trauma alert, a cardiac. We have alert for everything. Why not a hazmat alert?" And the the Reader's Digest version is it lets the hospitals know to get their decon stuff set up, to get their people ready, to let them know that the patient has been deconned, what they were exposed to, what treatments, if any, have been done. So it kind of, instead of just, hey, we're showing up with a patient involved in hazmat, it kind of gives them a little bit more. And if anybody wants our protocols, email me at bob at hazmat101consultants.com. I'll send it to you and you can look them over and meet with your medical staff and do whatever you feel you want to do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If you have any indication, when you see those salts anywhere, any kind of a crystalline powder, start thinking cyanides and think about the fact that there is that secondary exposure risk far beyond a lot of the other methods that we're talking about here. Which we'll jump into our next one. Very common carbon monoxide. Uh, can happen a lot of times. It'll be an intentional thing, maybe a vehicle that's been running in a garage. It could be someone that uses a charcoal grill. But the first autopsy that I ever attended was a mother and adult son that it was a suicide by carbon monoxide due to a vehicle being intentionally left running in a garage. So, very common method. Access to what is needed is not difficult and doesn't raise any alarm bells. So it's something that we see a lot of.
And I'll tell you our little story again, one we had in a second, but I want to bring up something that people don't realize. Not everybody has a multi-gas meter. Not every first arriving unit has that. But what we're seeing more and more is ambulance or rescue trucks or whatever you want to call them, or engine companies have a single sensor CO detector, and
Hmm.
they have it affixed to their jump bag. Unfortunately, the problem is when they go into the scene, what a lot of people do is they leave their gear on the stretcher and walk in. That does you no good. It defeats the purpose. So
Yeah.
I would recommend, or we would recommend, taking the single sensor CO detector that you have on your jump bag, and if you wear a radio strap, put on your radio strap. If you have a tablet that you're going to do the patient report, we know that's got to go in on every call, right? Put it to the strap that holds it together, so that you are always by default bringing that in with you, because there have been people, and we do it in some of our drills in our ops review class, that walk right in and guess what? Now you're the patient or
Yeah,
worse.
and it's a passive air monitoring procedure where we're not thinking about it. It's just there running in the background. And if it alerts us, it alerts us. We actually had a crew that when they were in the ED transferring a patient, the one that was on their cardiac monitor that they attached to there started going off. And then that's when it was kind of, brought to the forefront of, hey, maybe we shouldn't idle 7 or 8 ambulances in the ED bay because they were actually pumping carbon monoxide into the
Yeah.
ED. So, but had the crew not had that device there, colorless, odorless. People complaining of headaches. Every time I go to a hospital, I get a headache. So that wouldn't be the thing that gets your attention. But having that device there, the technology is available. It doesn't take any effort on our part. It's literally sitting there in the background. And carbon monoxide is the number one source of poisoning in the industrialized world. So why not?
Yeah, and if you go to a CO alarm, somebody's CO alarm's going off, and you have a rainbow sensor, throw that on them while you're trying to figure out what's going on in the apartment, because you may get something on their met hemoglobin that's saying, hey, you know what, they were actually exposed, and you haven't even gone into the apartment or house yet. So that's a good term. But what we ended up having was a carbon monoxide alarm going off in an adjacent apartment, and they couldn't figure out what it was. Simultaneously, the apartment in question had called, said they hadn't heard from their relative in a while. So the engine company went, knocked on the door, got no answer. But the lieutenant was on the ball, and he's like, you know what? These two things, that's just not random. One apartment next to another. So they called us out, and sure enough, we walked in with our meters, As soon as we got halfway through the apartment, we had elevated readings of CO. And once we forced the door open to the bathroom, that's where we found the individual lying in the bathtub deceased with a Coleman grill, that charcoal grill that he had lit, and had towels up against the door and in the vents to try to keep the CO as much contained in the apartment or in the bathroom. Unfortunately, it leached through to the next apartment, which is why that person had a headache and called 911. So we had a CO alarm going off in one spot, somebody with a headache, and then somebody said we haven't seen our relative in a while. So all these, we got to be detectives a little bit, is the moral of the story, and we got to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, and we talk about it, and we talk about our air monitoring in general with carbon monoxide. I mean, what's happening is the carbon monoxide simply taking the spot that oxygen would normally take with the hemoglobin. It's just bonding there and it's moving through. So you're going to have other people who are potentially exposed. High flow O2 is going to be the way that you're going to reverse that, but you have to also make sure that you're looking for signs and symptoms of your own crew. If after this call people are complaining of a headache, anything like that, chances are they may have been exposed. And having that rainbow sensor, having that technology be able to check SPCO, that that's valuable, and it costs nothing to actually test it. The device costs something, but each individual test isn't costing anything. It's just like putting on a pulse ox, but a
Right.
pulse ox will never see what that rainbow sensor will see. They're two different functions, so don't confuse one with the other.
Right, exactly. And one last thing, and this is again something that our good friend Chief Turner brought up to us, was a suicide by sodium nitrate. And Derek's
Hmm.
got some information there that we're going to share.
Yeah. So think about this a little bit like we do carbon monoxide, except instead of the simple bonding of carbon monoxide into the spot that O2 would normally go to, what's actually happening here is the nitrites causing methemoglobinemia, which is the iron in the hemoglobin is oxidizing and it's losing its ability to bind with and to release oxygen. So you're becoming hypoxic. Um, Even if we're giving high flow O2. The carbon monoxide calls, we can give high flow O2 and we can basically force out and force in the oxygen. Um, Methemoglobinemia, you cannot do that with simple oxygen therapy because it's actually an oxidation of the iron in the hemoglobin that's preventing that binding and releasing. So some things that would kind of clue you into it. If you notice any kind of white crystalline powders. So, kind of like we were talking about with the cyanide. So, this is going to kind of lean you in that same direction as cyanide. Well, is this cyanide or are we dealing with a nitrate? Because they're going to present somewhat similarly. One of the big clues would be if you see anything that says like curing salts or food preservative, those would be indicators of okay, this isn't a cyanide, this is a nitrate issue. Um, the patient would be cyanotic. They'd have that ashen gray color. Um, if you did any kind of an intervention where there's going to be a blood flash in an IV or anything like that, they have a characteristic chocolate colored blood. It's a very dark brownish look to the blood. That is that indication of methemoglobinemia. Is that you're going to see that change in the blood because it's the oxidation of the iron. Um, so an indicator, if you have something, again, because you might be coming out to this call because of a neighbor in the adjoining structure, it's going to be someone who's cyanotic and it's not improving regardless of what we do. They're going to have the blue tinged lips, things like that, difficulty breathing, dyspnea, headache, but high flow O2 is not resolving it. CPAP is not resolved. All the methods that we might use are not resolving it because it's literally happening at a level that the hemoglobin can no longer transfer oxygen. Um, Pulse ox, It may or may not give you any change in normal O2 levels. What's going to be your indicator here is using your rainbow sensor. This is where you're going to change your rainbow sensor from reading SPCO to looking at SP-MET because you're looking for that MET hemoglobinemia. So if you see cyanosis in someone and regardless of oxygen therapy, we're not getting an improvement, think hemoglobinemia. There's a good chance with the other indicators that were there, that's what we're dealing with. Um, it's got a low inhalation risk. It's not something that you're just going to get. Dermal exposure is possible. So we have to be very mindful of that. Nitrates, nitrites, they can be absorbed from powders. The patient's sweat, making contact with the patient, ungloved hand, and the patient's diaphoretic, that can actually transfer to you. So gloves, eye protection, the standard PPE that we should be wearing on these calls will protect you. Um, and if we do end up with any of these calls, stripping the patient down and performing decon is the way to go. You want to get anything that could cause a secondary exposure or continued exposure. Take that out of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the big thing with this is it looks like hypoxia, but it acts like a poisoning. So if you're seeing that hypoxia and O2 therapy isn't fixing it, think think that you got either a nitrate exposure or something else causing methemoglobinemia.
Yeah, and that's a good one. I hadn't heard of this until Chief Turner brought it up, so I appreciate him bringing it to our attention. But man,
Yeah,
geez, time flies. That was just
it's because we're having fun.
we are having fun. We always have fun, buddy. All right. Before we wrap another episode up, here's our social media sites. Please follow us on Facebook. You can also listen to these great HazChat episodes on all your favorite platforms, or better yet, go watch it on our YouTube channel, HazMat 101 Consultants. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check it out. And one of the last things, I had a new book come out in October. Very proud of. It's been selling. I'm very good. It's been selling good. I'm so very surprised. Hazards and Hindsights, Reflections on Risk and Readiness. These are just lessons learned incidents. Derek's got one in there. Kevin Ryan's got one in there. I've got a few in there. And it's basically real runs and some lessons that we've learned because that's what it's all about is learn from each other. And then some favorite websites for you to also check out. The Hazmat Guys Roundtable, first Tuesday of every month, 8 p.m. Eastern. Myself, Bobby Salvesen, Mike Monaco. Oh, talking too fast. And Jeff Seintek do a live show first Tuesday of every month, 8 p.m. Eastern. Hazmat Group 2, we have over 10,000 members we're really happy about. Common Sense Hazmat and our Hazmatter group. All great resources to get information from. And people load up files, ask questions. And that's what the community is all about. It's helping one another. Um,
Yeah.
and learning as much as we can. So, Derek, any final words?
I'd say, as with anything that we talk about, the big takeaways are educate your crews, not just your hazmat people, your operations level people, your first in people. Educate them, teach them how to recognize different setups, whether it's for the chem suicide we talked about here, or recognizing hazards presented in other settings for any type of call. And the priority is protecting yourself and protecting the public. So
Yep.
just those are the big takeaways from everything we talk about: is educate, recognize, and protect.
And lastly, before we go, if you guys have a topic, you have a run, some kind of incident, something you want to talk about, we don't have to mention who you are if you don't want to. You're afraid you're going to get jammed up or something. Just shoot me an email, bob at hazmat101consultants.com. Or if you want one of our great classes, let us know and we'll be happy to help you out. But it is about sharing information. So, as we always say at the end of every show, thank you for listening. And what, Derek?
When you're through learning,
You're
you're through.
through. Stay safe, guys.